Okay, we're on video number 2, so I'm not sure how these are going to all load to the Western Theater Group, but I just wanted to give another video while I am in this general area. These steps led to an old church, and the old church, this is where Captain John Don't Call Me Hump Morgan mustered into the Confederate service in September of 1861. The church was burned during the siege of Munfordville in September of 1862, but I just wanted to kind of quick hit here, and then we have in memory of the dead of the 10th Mississippi Regiment, and they say Munfordville instead of Munfordville, and actually this probably would be better served at a different location, probably over on the other side of the railroad where the 10th Mississippi actually fought. But we're standing outside the cemetery here. We have Fort Craig in the background, and that's going to be another topic of conversation. We'll talk a little bit about some of those politics I alluded to earlier. Let me come into the cemetery. Nice to see that the stones have been cleaned. Not nice to see that they're using the wrong flag to commemorate these Confederates who never fought under that particular flag. It's also interesting here. We've got the keys. The father was instrumental in helping to build the railroad bridge, which if you look, let's zoom in here. That's the bridge. That's part of the bridge there in the distance. Do that easy. There you go. Let me back up. So the Keys were instrumental in building the bridge, which is ironic because the Keys were also instrumental in dismantling one of the foundations when they were trying to destroy the bridge early in the war. I imagine the Keys probably didn't feel too good about destroying completely the work that they had been involved with. They had all joined out. We've got John here with the 6th Kentucky Mounted Infantry, but one source I saw said that all these men, the father and 2 sons, actually joined the 4th Kentucky Cavalry. There's Abner, which makes sense to a point. And then we've got John the father over here. Just as Kentucky Cavalry CSA. Sometimes the Confederate stones don't have necessarily complete research, only because sometimes the research is non-existent. So anyway, so we've got these stones here. There's a couple more veterans in here, Federal and Confederate, and we'll go walk by them in a second. Anyway, so this is the Key family. Locals, as a matter of fact, they are ancestors, if I have this correct, of the Seymour family. And it's the Seymour family who owns, or at least owned, I'll say owns, most of this property down here. All this light brown grassy area is part of the Munfordville Preserve. But unfortunately, you can't go on that. That'll be the next stop, the next piece of politics I'll talk about a little bit here in the next video. All right, we'll move around. Again, Confederate folks, please start marking your graves properly. These guys would have fought almost exclusively under variations of the First National, not the battle flag. So even Morgan's command, as late as June of 1864, we're still carrying a version of the First National, because there's a First National that's captured on June 12th, 1864 at Cynthiana, Kentucky. So they're still carrying that late in the war. And we've got a 21st Kentucky infantry guy right here. Looks like a newer stone, but yeah, I think the style's newer. And then we've got I've got Gano. Well, I'm not 100% sure if the accuracy of that stone either, because Gano's regiment was actually the 7th. Now, Kentucky cavalry regiments, as many of us know, really bounce around a lot in terms of organization. But I do know that Gano's is the one that will turn into the 7th Kentucky Cav later in the war. So anyway, all right, let's go over to Fort Craig, which is allegedly privately owned. Now, I say allegedly, and there's a reason for that. I was just doing a little bit of research the other day, and I came across, I think it's in a newspaper article or it's in the bicentennial book that the town put together back in the 70s. I think in the 70s. Yeah, actually, that might be it. So there was a group here called the Munfordville Battlefield, we'll say association or foundation. They were in existence many years ago. And in the article, it clearly states that the Fort Craig property, the title to this property, was actually given to the Munfordville Battlefield Association. Now, that group is no longer in existence. I assume it was a nonprofit at one point. But that group is no longer in existence. But when that group went out of existence, what happened with the title? I don't know. Did it revert back to, excuse me, did it revert back to the private ownership? What happened to it, right? I don't know. So unfortunately, though, we do have a state of Kentucky historical marker here that's seen a lot better days. Hey, Stuart Sanders, that's a good project. Let's get this one replaced. And that's Fort Craig. And you can see how deep the entrenchments are, how high the walls are. That's clearly defined and described in the attacks or in the accounts of the Confederate soldiers that fought here on September 14th of 1862 at the Battle of Munfordville. Not Mum, but Munfordville. A little old sign there, old wooden sign, says Fort Craig. And then you're looking out, again, this is the battlefield area. And if you look closely, let me zoom in again. All right, well, there is an interpretive panel in the middle of that field. Unfortunately, today, you cannot get to that interpretive panel. And you know what? I'll wait till the next stop. But in the distance, you can't quite see it from this angle, but in the distance will be the Louisville and Nashville Railroad. And then again, on the other side of the railroad, kind of where the clearing is, and then to the north of that, you can't quite see, would be where the 10th Mississippi, 44th Mississippi would have assaulted or tried to assault the earthworks and the stockade that was on that side. High ground in that distance, where you kind of see where that grassy clearing is. High ground that distance would have been where Ketchum's Alabama battery would have deployed initially, and that's a conversation I'll do in a different video here in just a little bit. But again, all this nice, rustic brown color is the preserve, which again today we cannot get on. And anyway, I'm going to do some more digging on this property. I don't know how successful I'll be, but who actually owns this piece of property where Fort Craig stands today. Where I am standing, see, this is facing pretty much west, so let me turn here. This is facing east. When Chalmers comes up to attack this position, he's received information from a Confederate Cavalry Brigade Commander John Scott, who was part of actually Kirby Smith's army, Edmund Kirby Smith's army. And Scott is operating on the north side of the river. Scott will send information down that Chalmers will receive that says, hey, if you come up, we can capture this small garrison that's here at Munfordville, here on the south side of the Green River. We can capture this garrison here. So Chalmers, this is the night of the 13th, he gets his men up and gets them moving, and they will march up the road. They'll come from the south to the north, march up the road, and then Chalmers will launch an attack against the Union positions here, not knowing at this particular point that he's actually outnumbered. So the Union have more troops, and they have them in favorable defenses. As a matter of fact, it looks like there's a bit of a flag over there, and that might be the Smith Monument. You can see a little bit of a flag blowing every now and then. Kind of wear that upright. Let me see if I can get my finger there, right in there. Anyway, we'll get over there later today. And so Scott convinces Chalmers to come up. Scott has told Chalmers that the railroad north of Munfordville has been cut, so no federal reinforcements will arrive. That, unfortunately, isn't accurate because federal reinforcements will arrive over the next couple of days in September. And Chalmers will launch his attack. Again, he'll deploy his artillery in the high ground in the distance. The 10th Mississippi will be on that side. On this side, I'm going to get the regiments wrong, so bear with me. 7th, 9th, and 29th Mississippi regiments, they'll come up on this side of the railroad, and they'll come up from the south, but they'll bend, and they'll actually deploy in a north to south line facing west, and they'll assault this position from the east. So they're coming right at the camera right now, and so they'll come into this position. So there's a lithograph or an illustration that shows Confederates assaulting Fort Craig. That is happening right in this area. Like it is, they've had to fight through some abattis, those are down tree limbs that are sometimes sharpened with points, but it makes it really difficult to march through because a lot of times the limbs are intertwined and whatnot. But that illustration is pretty much happening from this particular point. On the other side, and I'll do another video over there, on the other side, the 10th Mississippi's got their own problems, and then they become supported by the 44th Mississippi. Ketchum's battery is actually 4 guns, 2 6-pounders and 2 12-pounder howitzers. The 6-pounders don't have very good range, and that battery will split into 2 pieces. One section will stay on that side, but another section will come to this side. Now, where there's some high ground down here by the Anthony Woodson house itself. Probably that's where the 6-pounders were, because they'll initially deploy farther down on high ground and they didn't have the range to the fort. That's probably the 6-pounders, because the effective range of a 6-pounder is not great. And so they move those 6-pounders up where the Anthony Woodson house is so they get into range of the Union fortifications. But the 7th and the 9th and the 29th Mississippis will assault against this area. But unfortunately, over their right shoulders, they start to take artillery fire, most likely from that high ground out in that area. Now, there's so many ridges and little hillocks in this area. I don't know specifically which one it is, but Haffendorfer's got them fairly close. John Scott has got, I'll get these regiments wrong again, 1st Georgia, 1st Louisiana, 4th Tennessee, and the Buckner Guards. Actually, I think I have them right. And then a battery of 4 guns under Holmes. He'll bring, the 1st Louisiana will come over to this side of the river to try to help and support Chalmers' attack. Scott doesn't even realize the attack is going on. He starts to hear firing, figures it's Chalmers, comes across with the 1st Louisiana and probably a gun or 2, probably a section of Holmes's battery, which starts to shell in this direction. Again, at the fort, starts to shell in this direction, but a lot of those rounds are now falling into the backs of the Mississippians. And so the Mississippians, some of them will actually turn and start to move towards Holmes's battery position. Again, I'm pretty certain, just based on terrain, it's probably that piece of ground right there. We'll move towards that unit until they figure out, oh, nope, that's friendly fire. This is very similar, different direction, but very similar to what happens to a couple of the regiments in Bushrod Johnson's brigade at Perryville, October 8th of 1862, when they're shelled by Slocum's 5th Company of the Washington Artillery. It's very similar. So the Confederates can't take this position. As a matter of fact, they can't take any of this defensive works, and they'll wind up falling back. Now, Chalmers will send in a, hey, you better surrender type of missive that really gets him nowhere. But Chalmers then will fall back to Horse Cave. I'm going to say Horse Cave, Cave City, Horse Cave. He'll fall back, which then, because of this assault that happens, Bragg, I think, feels obligated to bring up the rest of the army. And I'll talk about that maybe tomorrow, maybe later today. But Bragg will bring up the rest of the army to capture this garrison here at Munfordville. All right, I'm going to go down to the Woodson house, and we'll talk a little bit about politics there.